Hi, everyone. My name is Allison Metz, and I'm a professor and director of implementation practice at the School of Social Work at UNC Chapel Hill. I'm joined today by Blake Strode and Amy Morris, who are the co-authors of the SSIR article, Trust the People. In this article, Blake and Amy tell their story about how they developed a relationship between Arch City Defenders, a legal advocacy organization, and Amplify Fund, a philanthropic funder that was grounded in mutual trust. Together, they came around a campaign to close a jail and to redirect those resources back into the community. It's an amazing story, and I can't wait for you to hear more from Blake and Amy, and they'll be sharing some amazing thoughts around equitable implementation. So before we begin, I just wanted Blake and Amy to introduce themselves. So Blake, how about you go first?
Hi, my name is Blake Strode. My pronouns are he, him, his, and I'm the executive director of Arch City Defenders, which is a holistic legal advocacy organization in St. Louis, Missouri, that combats the criminalization of poverty and state violence, particularly in communities of color.
Hi, I'm Amy Morris. I'm the director of the Amplify Fund based at Neighborhood Funders Group. I use she, her pronouns. And Amplify is a pooled grant-making fund that works in 8 places across the country, including in Missouri. And we work at the intersection of power building in Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities and equitable development.
Thank you again for joining me for this discussion today. One of the things that's different about your article in the SSIR supplement and really stands out is that you start the article by sharing your individual backgrounds and how that brought you to this relationship that you have with each other and that your organizations have. So I would love to hear from you around why you thought it was important to start the article that way, to talk about your backgrounds and the path that led you on. So I wondered, Blake, if you might kick us off again and kind of talk about that beginning part of the article and why that was important to you.
Sure. I think there were a couple of reasons for it. One is that we really wanted to tell a story. We didn't want to be too preachy or prescriptive. We just wanted to share some of our experiences and what we'd learned through the process of working together, which was all about trust and relationships. Beyond that, I think when talking about a partnership, it felt really important to bring the fullness of those two partners to the table. I think so often when we talk about partnerships and collaborative projects, we do so as if they started at the moment that those parties came together. And we know that people actually bring individual experiences, lessons, knowledge, skill sets, and that can both complicate collaboration and it can really, I think, contribute to the richness of the collaboration, which certainly felt like it was true in this example. So we wanted to really make sure that we were sort of speaking to the kind of post-Ferguson moment that we were in, how that brought me back to St. Louis, how that informed the work at Arch City, and all the work that went into building Amplify and making it what it is.
Oh, thank you so much. Amy, what else would you want to add about what you were hoping to convey to the reader in those early paragraphs?
Yeah, I really share many of Blake's sentiments about why we included that initial part of the article. You know, at Amplify Fund, we often say that really what we really work in like the currency of relationships. I think that, funders so often are like funder with a capital F. And somehow that makes us these like part of an institution more than it does human beings. But in fact, each of us who work in foundations, who work in pooled funds, are just people. And we bring to our work, everything that it is that makes us up as human beings. And I think that for me, it's as a white woman doing this work, it's particularly important to be really present with all of the parts of myself that have developed over time around race and gender and sexual orientation and class privilege, and all of the ways in which who I am show up in the everyday relationships that I have with the people that I have the privilege of working with. I think that's as much about the kind of the person who comes to be in relationship with another person, as it is about, as Blake mentioned, the elements of kind of experience and background and knowledge that have been built over time for each of us.
Thank you. Thank you so much. The article really emphasizes the importance of centering equity in the funding relationship. And the title, Trust the People, you really talk a lot about that centering equity in that relationship does require trust. And you both just touched upon it in terms of those opening sections of the article. I wondered, Blake, if you could talk a little bit more about how this funding relationship or funding experience was different than other experiences you had, and how that difference affected your efforts to close down the workhouse, the jail.
So, I think anyone who works in or has worked in nonprofits knows that there are many philanthropic practices that just get in the way of getting the work done. It's a much discussed topic in nonprofit circles, that you have the really onerous reporting requirements, that every grant you apply for looks different, that they ask for different documents, that sometimes in terms of the evaluation of how you did with the money, it requires that you produce things that aren't produced in the normal course of doing the work, even though there may be other things you do produce that could be just as valuable. And we sort of referred to all of those things in the article as these mundane surveillance patterns, ways of making sure that the fundees are doing exactly what they're supposed to do with the funds that they receive. And the experience with Amplify Fund has always been very, very different from that. The relationship on the front end is really developed and strengthened through much discussion and learning about the organization and the funding priorities. And on the back end, there's the same sort of relational check-in about how things are going, about what we've been able to accomplish, about what the needs still are. And that is very different. It's also different that typically philanthropy speaks a lot about collaboration, but doesn't actually move funds in ways that support collaboration. And the Close the Workhouse campaign has always been a collaborative project. We are one of 3 core organizations. We're working with many, many community members. We needed to move funds flexibly and quickly. And the partnership with Amplify allowed us to do that in ways that some traditional practices in philanthropy really have stood in the way of, when you need to have one accountable fundee, when you need to be able to track everything that's done with those dollars. And so that's a huge difference.
Thank you so much. The article has an incredible checklist in it, a funder's checklist that really talks about trust building. And I encourage every person listening to this to take a look at the article and that checklist. And Amy, I wondered if you could just talk a little bit more about the funder's checklist and how it can be used.
Sure. I mean, I think the place to start here is just to acknowledge that the fact of the matter is that philanthropy as a sector really has very few systems of accountability outside what each individual foundation, the sort of systems of accountability that each individual foundation or fund sets up for themselves. So all of these ideas that I think are pretty mainstream in our sector about reporting, about kind of directing what a group that you fund might do with the resources, that you have to, listen in, be a part of meetings, kind of have this, as we talked about in the article, culture of surveillance, is made up. We don't have to do that in this sector. And so the checklist, or the check yourself list, is really, what it talks about is 3 categories: that building trust and being in a trusting relationship means giving more time to the work and to those relationships. It means giving more resources, and it means giving over more control. And I think, this checklist, you'll notice, is not about what a foundation should fund. It's not about the conversations that we spend so much time in this sector having of how can we better understand, what are the policy levers around equitable development, or what might be the ways in which this health, inequity could change, or whatever the issue area might be. It's about the how of doing this work. And I think that, there's nothing in this checklist that every foundation, every grant making fund can't just do if they decide to do it. So I think it's a matter of raising awareness, of knowing that there's community of other funders who are acting and operating in this way. Amplify is not alone in this, that you can come into relationship with if you want to learn how to implement these kinds of practices. And I would just say, I think that some of the belief that we have to act in certain ways is sort of a self-fulfilling, loop, and that it's not that hard to break out of that. And the benefits that it can reap both for groups that are beneficiaries of a kind of trust-based philanthropy that can really, as Blake has just talked about, make the work move to a different level, as well as the kinds of relationships it means folks get to be in as funders.
Thank you so much. I hope a lot of folks are listening to that response. Thank you so much. One of the things that you talk about in your efforts to close down the workhouse is you write about the importance of deepening and spreading connections within the community. I wondered if you might just take a moment to share a strategy or two that you use to deepen connections with community, or to deepen connections among community partners, and just anything that comes to mind for you around that.
Yeah, so we have a kind of mantra at Arch City that I adopted from my predecessor, the founding executive director at Arch City, Thomas Harvey, who would say, listen to what our clients tell us and believe them. And it really is that simple at the end of the day in our work. And it applies very much in our work around the workhouse, that we started focusing and partnering with others to try to close the workhouse because we were working with people that were being released from that facility, who were speaking about the horrific, inhumane conditions, the abuse and disrespect from guards, the ways in which they were only there because they couldn't afford to buy their way out, and that they knew the place shouldn't exist and needed to be closed. And this entire campaign is an expression of that belief from our clients, from folks that we've supported and worked with and advocated for and helped to organize. And I think that's true for all of the partners around the campaign, that for us, this practice of leaning into trusting relationships has been trusting the people, trusting the people closest to the problem, which is a phrase that we hear a lot now, but I think don't live into often enough. So we've really tried to do that with this campaign, with directly impacted folks. And for other members of the community that may not be directly impacted the same way, there have also been a lot of ways to plug in. We have folks that give members rides to meetings, that provide foods, that call their elected officials in the city. There's a role for everyone to play. And I think you have to just get into relationship with folks in a certain kind of way to figure out what the best role is.
Thank you so much. Anything to add there, Amy?
Yeah, I think there's two things I would say. One is just listening to you, Blake, really takes me, like the mantra that you have around listening to your clients, listening first, really resonates also with our practice and the way that we try to be in the work. And it makes me think of a part in the article where I share and kind of acknowledge that it took me a minute to understand how the Close the Workhouse campaign fit with our theory of change as a fund. And just how much I've gotten to learn through being in relationship with Blake and the other leaders in this campaign as a result of that, of that listening and that learning. And the second thing to say is that, Close the Workhouse and so much of the work that we support as the Amplify Fund is collaborative. And I just want to call out one practice that we have always had an intention of launching, but have just in the months since the article was written, have actually been able to make come to life, which is that we launched the opportunity to make a round of what we called collaboration grants to our grantees. And this is a round of grant making that is in addition to the general operating support that we provide to all of the groups that we support. Was asking them, where are you in relationship with other groups, whether they're other Amplify grantees or not, and what are you doing collaboratively together? And how is that collaboration deepening your work, deepening your relationships, deepening the impact that you want to see happen in the community that you live in? And I just want to call that out because I think it's an important practice to be funding each individual group directly with general operating support. And in addition to that, to be funding a collaborative effort like Close the Workhouse. So the organizations like Arch City Defenders that make up the Close the Workhouse campaign can't just keep the lights on, pay their staff, afford all of the things that make them able to come to a table as good collaborators if they're starved on the side that is just the like month-to-month, day-to-day running of the organization. Collaboration, I think we have learned, takes resources, and it takes well-resourced organizations to be able to come together to pull something like this really incredible feat that the campaign has pulled off, to make that happen together.
Amazing. Amazing. So clear. Thank you. Any closing thoughts from you all today?
Sure. I would say two very quick things. One is that while we've had a lot of wins around the Close the Workhouse campaign and moved the needle in really significant ways, it is a fight that we are still fighting to ensure that we permanently close that jail and continue to divest from carceral systems. And that means we're still leaning into those relationships, still building the kind of trusting relationships to make that happen and to sustain that. And the second is just that these relationships are everywhere. You know, we talked about a grantee and funder relationship, talked a little bit about our relationship with clients, but these relationships are everywhere. And I think we should be trying to practice these principles in all of the relationships that we develop. Thank you so much. Amy?
Yeah, I just would echo the last point that Blake made. I mean, I think that there's no mystery to this. We're talking here about relationships that we all have in all parts of our life. And the fact of a relationship between a funder and a grantee shouldn't be something extraordinary, or that there's trust in that relationship. That should be something that we're seeing every day, all the time, in relationship between funders and groups that are receiving philanthropic support. And I just, want to say that the listening first, coming with a learning posture, and getting to be in relationship with amazing, leaders in the states and communities around the country where we work is such a gift to me. And it has just, it's pushed forward all of my thinking and all of the way that I work. And I also just want to acknowledge, part of that is getting to be inspired by the relationships that we see between and among the groups that we work with. And Blake could do a whole article, recorded video, whatnot, about his relationship to other, leaders in St. Louis that he gets to collaborate with. But I think it's just really apparent to me that the kind of everywhere you look, the way that relationships and trust are what is making change happen in the world is just so real and so important, I think, for all of us to lean into and invest in.
Thank you so much, both of you. Blake Strode and Amy Morris. The article is Trust the People, and you two were both completely inspiring. Thank you so much.